Okay, we're on chapter 2, Be Still and Know. And on page 48, Know God. What were you doing on August the 21st, 2017? You probably won't remember just by thinking back to that date, so maybe if you hear about an event that took place, it will help jog your memory. A total eclipse visible from our vantage point down here on Earth, an event that the U.S. hasn't seen since 1979. It was huge news. People organized viewing parties. Some took the day off from work. Others just went about their Monday routine, taking off items off of their agenda while the rest of us stared at the sky. Personally, I was excited to see it, but also uninterested enough to disregard the "you'll need to purchase these special glasses or you may go blind looking upward" announcement. So when the eclipse actually happened, I was walking down 23rd Street, a particularly buzzing thoroughfare on Manhattan's west side. 23rd Street runs through the heart of Chelsea, home to New York's upscale art galleries, independent theaters, and most iconic hotel. But it's also a transportation hub, close enough to Times Square to attract tourists and chain stores, and plenty of hyper busy, perpetually angry New Yorkers trying to get from A to B. That's where I was when the moon passed between the sun and Earth like someone in a crowded lit room slipping between two people in conversations, briefly blacking out the sunlight in the middle of the day. It was one of those New York moments I'll remember forever. People were stopped all over the sidewalk, passing glasses back and forth. As it turned out, it didn't matter who had prepared and who hadn't. Everyone wanted to look at. Everyone who wanted to look was getting the look, and everyone who looked was talking to one another like little kids. Sophisticated New Yorkers momentarily returning to their inner child at a science museum on a fourth grade field trip. That was most of us, but it wasn't everyone. There was another group of people, equally united in defiant annoyance at everyone clogging up the sidewalk to stare at the sun. They grunted and scoffed their way through the crowd, adult children disguised in business casual, using every nonverbal means of communication imaginable to say, "I'm really, really important, and you're in my way." That posture of annoyance was particularly ironic in light of perspective. If you reverse the perspective from the edge of the cosmos looking down instead of from 23rd Street down looking up, things look quite a bit different. From that angle, the annoyed, hustling and bustling, highly important people angling their way through the obstacle course of onlookers seemed insignificant. Our sun and moon and 8 planets are just one little neighborhood among an estimated 200 billion neighborhoods that make up our universe. If we think of the Milky Way galaxy as being in the size of the entire continent of North America, our solar system would fit in the coffee cup. 2 Voyager spacecrafts are cruising along the edge of the solar system at a rate of more than 35,000 miles per hour. They've been doing that for more than 40 years and have traveled more than 11 billion miles with no end in sight. When NASA sends communication to one of those Voyagers traveling at that velocity, it takes about 17 hours to get there. That data has led scientists to estimate that to send the speed of light message to the end of the universe would take more than 15 billion years to arrive. So yes, Chelsea art dealer, you are very important. But when we think about what we're all gazing at while you make your agitation known through grunts and mumbles, you're also impossibly young, urgently expiring, and unbelievably small. You and I see the world with our own 2 eyes. And from that minuscule perspective, we tend to convince ourselves that we are, or at least should be, in control, directing our own lives, and scripting our future. When we can come back to the truth that Philip Yancey reminded us of, early in the chapter. Prayer is the act of seeing reality from God's point of view. God is the one who calls us to be still and know that I am God. Psalm 8 marvels at this wonder. When I consider your heavens, the world of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them. That's verses 3 and 4 of Psalm 8. All of our scientific discoveries in the thousands of years since this simple prayer was written have only confirmed its wisdom. And the vast expense, who is this God who would concern himself with the likes of me? The great scandal and most important work of prayer is simply to let ourselves be loved by God. That's a good kind of small, and it comes with wonder at the God who was big enough to fashion the cosmos with his breath, and personal enough to take a real interest in the events of my day and fluctuations of my emotions. I love cities. Gritty, bustling, diverse urban streets have been home to me for the whole of my adult life. I feel more at home on a crowded, smelly subway platform than on a rural back road or in a suburban strip mall. But as is true, there's one obvious drawback to living in a major city: the sky above. The bright lights of the city below drown out the lights in the night sky above. Stars are mostly invisible from a city street. There isn't profound symbolism. Isn't there profound symbolism in the fact that our artificial lights drown out the heavenly lights? Unless you get a particularly clear, dark night, we found a way to darken the stars, a way to pretend that all we see here on the ground is all there is. The stars are still there, but in the city, the lights of our offices that stay on late, bright advertisements vying for our attention, the yellow glow of so many lamps and so many apartment windows, it all works together to drown out the lights that remind us of how small we are. It all works together to convince me that the world from behind my tiny perspective is all there is. City dwellers are in danger of missing what David saw: our lives against the backdrop of something bigger. What started with Adam and Eve never stopped. The same ancient conspiracy repeats itself in the Tower of Babel, in King Saul, in the Pharisaic priesthood, in the CEO of your company, and in me. We're all prone to drown out our view of God, to keep moving, to go about our lives as though we are the center. Stillness is the quiet space where God migrates from the periphery back to the center, and prayer pours forth from the life that has God at the center. Page 44, Know Yourself. Is chapter 2, Be Still and Know. Psalm 146, smack in the middle of a bunch of poetry praising the greatness of God, the psalmist drops the record-scratching lines: "Put not your trust in princes, in a son of man, in whom there is no salvation. When his breath departs, he returns to the earth. On that very day his plans perish." At first glance, these words seem woefully out of place, like a line from a eulogy that was accidentally added to a praise anthem. But seen from the right perspective, this is prayer. Western culture is increasingly a haven for the young, who look endlessly into a future of adventure and discovery stretching out in front of them. We celebrate the first half of life, toned up bodies, stylized wardrobes, vocational upward mobility, and exciting weekend plans. The elderly are a forgotten breed. I spent 12 years in New York City. I grieved the loss of the stars, but I relished the view of the skyline. My favorite view of the Manhattan skyline was always the angle from Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. There's the picture. I was always strangely comforted when I looked across all those tombstones and the city spires behind them. Every one of those stones represents someone who was living fast, making plans, and dodging every obstacle in the way of their preferred future. In other words, someone with a will who did their best to bring that will to bear on the present moment. Now they're a memory, and the city is filled with new people living even faster and making more plans. This view has a way of reminding me that everything I'm stressed about, every conflict that's replaying in the back of my mind, every anxiety churning in my stomach, and every preoccupation I have about tomorrow morning, all of that noise one day will cease. When his breath departs, he returns to the earth, and on that very day his plans perish. These tombstones are an important reminder of how temporary I am. Psalm 39, another of David's prayers, reads, "Show me, Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is. You have made my days a mere handbreadth. The span of my years is as nothing before you." Everyone is but a breath, even those who seem secure. But by now, you know that David's doing what David's doing when he prays. He's undermining the most ancient conspiracy, the lie whispered just before Adam and Eve plucked the forbidden fruit was, "You will not certainly die." That lie wreaked, and still wreaks havoc on human soul and on social order. So a prayer like, "Let me know how fleeting my life is not so self-deprecating or depressive. It's self-aware victory. To turn our fast lives into stillness and our busy minds into solitude is an act of rebellion against the curse that runs through our veins. When we live in constant noise, we forget our mortality, and the consequences are of the furthest reaching variety. Live like this world, and this life is all you got. And you lose yourself in trying to be everything for everybody. Pretending you are eternal is a miserable, dehumanizing lie, and the original lie. We never tire of believing it and never fail to lose ourselves in it. On the contrary, when by stillness we remember our mortality, we recover who we are. Solitude is the furnace of transformation, says Henry Nouwen. Without solitude, we remain victims of our society and continue to be entangled in the illusions of the false self. Solitude is the place of great struggle and a great encounter. The struggle against the compulsions of the false self and the encounter with the loving God who offers himself as the substance of the new self. David was pleading with God to remind him that he is temporary, not because he was depressed, but because it would show him his true value. What is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them? You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. That's Psalm 8, verse 4 and 5. When I pray, when I see myself as I really am from God's perspective, I behold not only my own smallness, but also how valuable I truly am to God. David goes on to pray things like, "God keeps count of my anxious tossing while trying to sleep and bottles up every tear I've ever shed. God's good thoughts toward me outnumber the grains of sand on the world's beaches." Where does someone get the moxie to pray like that? David is free enough to admit he's not in control, not all powerful, not enough, and doesn't have to be. He's not wallowing in his lack. He's celebrating it. When you see how great God is and how fragile and fleeting you are, you equally see how profoundly you matter. The Creator has time for you. You and I are clay jars. We're dust. But God has hidden redemption in us. God has hidden away a kind of life that never stops in us. Only when you see who you really are can you also see how profoundly you matter. The creature only needs a certain degree of awareness of what it really is, and it will break forth into prayer, wrote 19th century Swiss theologian Hans Urs von Balthasar. Be still and know that I am God. Slow down. Remember who God really is. Remember who you really are. That's prayer. I'll stop there for now on page 47. And the next session I'll record momentarily. Thank you very much.